I'd just like to share with you some information about the right brain and the left brain, which is taken from Teepa Snow. I think it's really relevant and helpful.
Okay.
Really. She says that, the brain is, as we saw on the video, the brain is divided into two hemispheres, the right side and the left side. The left brain is to do with the cognition side, and it's the side which gets lost in dementia. So what is lost is vocabulary, comprehension, speech production, and impulse control. These are some of the things, not all of them, but some of them. But interestingly, and I found this so fascinating, the right brain, which is the creative part of the brain, is not damaged to anything like the same degree, anything like as quickly. And so one of the skills that is retained, and I was really surprised when I learned about this, is social chit-chat.
Okay.
Because it made a lot of sense to me. I've heard over the years so many people saying, I look after him at home, he can't do this, he can't do that, my life's misery. My son rings up once a month, and I put my husband on the phone to talk to him, and he talks to him. And then he says, I'll hand you back to your mother. And my son comes on, he says, I don't know what you're on about, Mum, he's fine. And I've seen it myself. I saw a man who, when I was a social worker, this man, he was a very clever engineer, and he ended up, it was in Wellawing at the day hospital, long, long ago. And I went to see him because there was a big meeting to decide what was going to happen to him, where he was going to go. And I noticed he knew me well, we had a really good relationship. I noticed he was sweating, but he made a point of talking to, saying the name of every member of staff who came through the ward where we were sitting while this meeting was going on. And then I realised he'd got them all written down on a piece of paper as a crib.
Right.
And he realised that they were about to assess him, and he was trying to convince me and everybody else how smart he was.
Right.
And he was able to do that. Now, people used to talk about this social facade, was the word used, as if the person was doing this deliberately. It's not. It's the primitive brain coming to the rescue of the advanced brain, which is not coping, and that ability is still there.
Yes.
And it can get you a very long way.
Well, we're all social animals.
Yes.
We spend our lives connecting and communicating and trying to learn these social skills.
Yeah.
So
it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So another one, of course, is rhythm, which is obviously to do with a very primitive part, and people respond to rhythm. And I think Teepa Snow uses rhythm a lot, doesn't she, in her work with people?
Yes, I've seen that on a video. She will, if somebody's struggling to perhaps walk, she'll stand next to them and rock gently with them. Yeah. And then after they've done that for a little while, she then can start to walk forwards.
Yes, that's
and
right.
It's almost like a safety mechanism, and then you get into that rhythm, and then you can start to
because
progress.
That bit is still working, you see. And then the other one, of course, we're aware, but nobody was quite so sure until relatively recently what was going on, is that music is in the right brain. It's in the limbic system. So is prayer.
Right.
So is poetry. All these things are safe, and they are wonderful gateways through which to connect.
Yes.
And in fact, more powerful than ordinary speech. And so when you've got somebody really skilled, like our music therapists, they can use music to replace the missing language in words as a way to get close to people.
Well, Jenny often says when words fail,
music speaks, and it's absolutely true. Counting is also, and I have seen people with quite advanced dementia
who will
counting.
Count. Yes, I've seen that too.
And I'm a new lady. I've just remembered now. I knew a lady years ago, and she used to read everything that we went, it was in the hospital again, it was in that same day hospital, all the notices and the posters, you know how they're stuck all over the walls in hospitals, and she would read everything as we went through, but she had no idea what it meant, but she could actually read it.
And again, a lot of this feels like rhythm, doesn't it? That social chit-chat between him and throwing.
But she was, it just felt like, and unfortunately, another one that lasts is swearing and racial comments, unpleasant language, and we've all had experience of this. And it can range from the very mild to like helping yourself to somebody else's food off their plate to really offensive. And swearing, and people would say, I don't know where she learned those words from. She would never have sworn in her. And but of course those words are all around us in our culture.
It's just the filter
has gone, and out they come, you see. Yes. I met so many couples when I was a social worker of a husband and wife, a dominant husband caring for a quiet little wife, and she was swearing like a trooper, and he would say, I don't know where it's all come from. I don't know what's going on. She's a changed woman. She's not the woman I married. And I think, I wonder, is she getting her own back? Is this payback time? You know, I've often wondered whether we've got this all right. And as we're learning more about the brain now, and learning more about how complex it is, actually, these are questions that... So basically, our message would be, instead of concentrating on what we've lost, let's concentrate on what we can still use.
And if the creative brain is being opened up a little bit because the left brain is lost, that sort of logic, that's you know, our inhibitions are being reduced, so maybe that opens up other creative pathways and other means of expression. You know, we've known people who found art.
I know, are amazing artists. Yes.
So and people who have really enjoyed music and found real joy in the moment of just engaging in musical activity, creative activity, poetry, which is something that families have said, oh, well, they never enjoyed poetry before. They never really enjoyed music. They'd never danced before. But somehow a playfulness can be...
Yes, and it may be that filter has gone and other things are free to bubble up, which is wonderful, isn't it, really? So another thing that I think is very interesting, T. Personnel talks about, is this phenomenon of repeated stories, which everybody is familiar in the dementia world, is familiar with. It's can be incredibly irritating when somebody said something 15 times. But do we ever ask why they do it, is what Tipo is saying. And she gives us a whole range of things. It might be that I'm trying to learn something new. It might be that I've decided to, for some reason, that this new information is important to my well-being, so I need to tell you. I might believe that someone else wants me to tell you. I may be practicing something, like I was with Stranger Things, so that I can do it better. And I may be doing something over and over and over again because it's better than doing nothing. Which is, you know, the dementia care mapping developed by Kitwood and used in care homes very widely in the 90s, showed that 85% of their time was spent alone.
Really?
They only... Staff observed residents around in the lounge when they're in the public areas only, and they watched it, unless they weren't allowed to count care interactions. If there weren't care interactions or meals, they actually had to observe what the person was doing and score it, and that this was the result over and over and over again, that most people's experience in care homes is of being alone.
Being alone, yes.
In the company of other people. It's a very lonely place to be. T. Personnel makes a distinction between responding and reacting. If you just react, you get irritated.
Yes.
Oh, for goodness sake, we've heard that before, you know. Come on, change the record or whatever it is. But if you respond, she reckons it allows you to take control of the situation and to actually think about what you're going to do. And you might be able to steer the conversation slightly onto a different part. You know, you're going along on the motorway over and over again. You might be able to have a junction and get off it.
So instead of just zoning out and listening to the story again and rolling your eyes and thinking, oh, you say, oh, that bit's really interesting. Yes. Could you tell me more about this? Could you tell me more about that? Well, yes, exactly. You again, it's a joint effort. It's again Sabat's joint effort that you're actually, as she said, you're responding to the person. You're not just, you know, and or it might even be worth noting when they're telling you the story, is it always at the same time? Is it always if they're feeling sad or lonely or anxious?
What is going on?
Is it a trigger?
Is it, you know, is it more than just people? Oh, people with dementia always tell the same story because they can't remember. It's really not as simple as that. Reacting simply creates more intense or frequent repetition. It's actually a way of reinforcing the behaviour. It will go on. The more you the more they're likely to go on with the story. So human beings are going to fill their time one way or another. We don't ever just sit doing nothing because it's not natural to us. So you can often alter, as we were saying, you can actually alter this story. It is possible to do that by the interjection and the response. And you know what is a go-to activity to get them off that track if they're completely stuck on it. But it's just, I think basically the go-to message there would be, there's more to this than meets the eye, and it's time we started to look at it instead of just saying, this is dementia and this is what happens.
Okay.
I'd just like to end by quoting from Teepa about behaviour in general, because I just thought it was so punchy. Impulsive attempts to enforce limits without thoughtful observation and use of skills can turn a risky situation into a dangerous one in only a few seconds. Yelling someone's name across the room, or being ineffective in grabbing something out of their hand or pulling them away from a door, can cause significant, if unintended, negative consequences. It could actually be dangerous. And, you know, that can happen if people don't know what they're doing. I mean, we've seen it. I'm sure we have. I've certainly seen it in care homes and psychiatric hospitals back in the day.
So it's about us being responsive to the needs and again about creating that non-anxious
it's about this shared, this joint venture and in the non-anxious environment. So I'm sure none of us do things like that, but just remember they're not good.
Yeah.